It was a cold Monday morning in Montgomery, Alabama, the kind that made even strong-boned men shiver under their coats. The streets had barely awakened, and the sky still held on to the last threads of darkness. In the heart of the city, Officer Dylan Graves pulled into the precinct parking lot, sipping a cup of coffee that had already gone tepid. He didn't expect anything unusual today. Maybe a few traffic stops, maybe a shoplifting report or two. Routine. That's what he hoped for. As he stepped inside the station, he exchanged a brief nod with Officer Reggie Turner, his partner of 3 years. They were different in almost every way, Graves, tall and clean-cut with an air of seriousness that never left his face, and Turner, shorter, relaxed, often cracking a smile even on the worst days. But together, they worked like clockwork. Barely 15 minutes into the shift, the call came through dispatch. Disturbance reported outside First National Bank. Elderly male refusing to leave the premises. Graves looked over at Turner and shrugged. Probably just someone trying to stay warm. Yeah, or maybe someone who thinks the ATM gives out hot coffee, Turner joked. They hopped into their cruiser and rolled down the street, lights off but siren ready. Montgomery wasn't a city known for chaos, but even small ripples could create echoes. When they pulled up to the bank, they spotted a small crowd. Nothing rowdy, just a few customers waiting outside, murmuring and casting glances toward the steps. There, standing still like a statue in front of the marble pillars, was an old black man wearing a frayed army green jacket. His shoulders were hunched but solid, his hands trembled slightly as they gripped a worn wooden cane, and a yellow envelope peeked from his coat pocket. The cap on his head, faded and bent, bore the words, Vietnam Veteran. The bank manager, a middle-aged man in a pressed blue suit, stepped forward, clearly agitated. Officers, we've asked him to leave. He's been standing there since just after dawn. He won't budge. Says he's waiting for something. Customers are getting uncomfortable. Has he threatened anyone? Turner asked. No. Nothing like that. But he won't listen. He refuses to leave. The man didn't look threatening. In fact, he looked almost sacred. As if time had carved its mark into his skin, and dignity still stood tall in his weathered frame. Graves walked over slowly. Sir. I'm Officer Graves. We got a call about a disturbance. What seems to be the problem? The old man lifted his head, revealing eyes that had seen more than most ever would. He spoke with a voice that carried strength and sorrow in equal measure. I've got a check I need to deposit. Told the lady at the window it was important. She said my ID's expired and turned me away. I told her I'd wait. And so I am. Graves glanced at the bank doors, then back at him. Sir, how long have you been out here? Since they unlocked the doors. I got no car. I took 2 buses to get here. Do you have any other form of ID? He shook his head. VA misplaced my paperwork years ago. It's been a fight getting anything back. But I finally got this check. It's for my granddaughter's college tuition. She starts this fall. Turner, who'd been standing just behind, leaned in. That's real admirable, sir. But the bank says they can't help unless you have proper ID. Maybe we can help you find another way. The man didn't respond at first. His lips tightened, then he muttered, all I got left in this world is my word and this paper. I'm not leaving without it being cashed. They can look me up. My name's Vernon J. Marshall. Graves sighed. It was one of those moments where procedure didn't leave much room for heart. The man was technically trespassing, refusing to leave private property. But he didn't want trouble. He just wanted to be heard. Still, protocol was protocol. Sir, Graves said gently, I'm gonna have to ask you to come with us. You're not in any kind of trouble, but we can't have you standing out here all day either. The old man straightened up, his back stiff, the dignity of a soldier returning to his stance. Then do what you gotta do, officer. But know this, I fought in Vietnam. Watched good men die in jungle mud. I came back with nothing. And even now, I'm just trying to help my blood get further than I ever did. So if you're gonna cuff me, go on. But don't expect me to hang my head. The word struck Graves harder than he expected. He paused. Turner glanced at him, waiting. But there didn't seem to be another path. They gently placed cuffs on Vernon's wrists, more out of regulation than necessity, and helped him into the back of the cruiser. The crowd murmured quietly, some shaking their heads, others pulling out phones. But Vernon never looked angry. He just looked tired. At the station, they sat him down in the intake room. The yellow envelope still in his pocket, untouched. Turner filled out the basic trespassing paperwork, while Graves stared at the man, struggling to make sense of the ache rising in his chest. "You said your name is Vernon J. Marshall?" he asked again. "That's right." Graves nodded and stepped out of the room. Something didn't sit right. He walked over to the front desk and pulled up a basic search. The name came up in a few local directories, and then, further down, something odd, a mention in a Department of Defense archival request. He clicked the link. There it was. Vernon J. Marshall. U.S. Army, Vietnam War. Awarded the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and Medal of Honor. Graves blinked. That couldn't be right. A Medal of Honor recipient? Sitting in their holding room for trespassing? Before he could dig deeper, the precinct doors swung open. A sleek black SUV skidded into the lot, and 3 sharply dressed men stepped out. Suits, badges, urgency written all over them. FBI, one of them said as they stepped inside. "We're here for Vernon Marshall. Now." Graves and Turner exchanged glances. "What's this about?" Turner asked, standing from his desk. The lead agent pulled out a folder and opened it, flashing an image of Vernon from decades ago, younger but unmistakable. "Mr. Marshall is a high-priority individual. He's one of the last living black veterans to receive the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War. We've been coordinating an event to honor him at the Capitol. The check he was carrying is a long overdue federal disbursement. He's been waiting over 40 years to get what was owed." The room fell silent. Graves felt his face flush with heat. "We didn't know. He never mentioned it." The agent looked at them, a hard edge in his tone. "He shouldn't have to." Graves walked back into the intake room, heart pounding. Vernon was still sitting calmly, looking around as if taking in memories from a different lifetime. "Mr. Marshall," Graves said, voice soft. "You're free to go. The FBI is here. They're taking you where you need to be." Vernon stood slowly. "Told you I wasn't leaving, till someone listened." As the agents escorted him out, one of them paused and turned back to Graves. "You boys just met a real American hero. Might want to think about how easy it is to overlook one." They left, silence following in their wake. Graves sat back at his desk, the weight of the badge suddenly feeling a lot heavier than it had that morning. He thought about how many times he'd walked past someone like Vernon in his life, assuming they were just another face in the crowd. But Vernon wasn't just another face. He was history. He was sacrifice. He was love in its purest, most determined form. And for a moment, the city outside seemed a little quieter, like it, too, was listening. The days that followed Vernon J. Marshall's brief detention at the precinct were unlike anything Montgomery had seen in years. News spread like a river breaking through a dam, first in whispers, then in roaring currents. Television crews parked outside the station, reporters camped near the courthouse, and the community buzzed with a new kind of electricity, a feeling that something important had been missed for too long and was finally demanding to be seen. Graves sat at his desk, scrolling through articles and broadcasts replaying the footage. Every shot showed Vernon's steady hands clutching that worn yellow envelope, every angle captured the dignity in his tired eyes. It was humbling, and it stung. He and Turner hadn't mistreated him, but they hadn't honored him either. They had arrested a hero without ever bothering to ask who he really was. Graves felt it like a stone in his chest. The mayor declared an official, Vernon J. Marshall Day, and invitations flooded in from schools, churches, veterans groups, and city leaders who all wanted to hear his story. The Capitol ceremony was moved up. The president himself had requested to meet Vernon in Washington. It was as if the country was trying, in its stumbling way, to right the wrongs of forgetting a man like him. But Vernon didn't seem interested in the noise. When Graves and Turner found the nerve to visit him at the small apartment complex on the west side of town, Vernon answered the door without hesitation. No bitterness in his eyes. No scorn. Just a man who'd seen far worse than two young cops making a mistake. He waved them inside. The apartment was modest, 2 battered chairs, an old TV, a few pictures on the walls. One photo showed Vernon in uniform, younger and unscarred by time, smiling with a group of soldiers. Graves guessed most of them hadn't made it home. "We wanted to apologize," Graves said, standing awkwardly by the door while Turner shifted beside him. Vernon chuckled low. "Boys, you did your job. Maybe not the way I'd have liked, but you weren't cruel. That's more than I can say for some places I've been." "But we didn't recognize you," Turner said, voice thick. "We should have seen, we should have treated you better." Vernon smiled, that same unbreakable, patient smile. "You didn't recognize me because you weren't taught to. World doesn't hand out lessons in respect, it hands out warnings. You learn to see with your heart, not your eyes. That's what makes the difference." Graves felt his throat tighten. The weight of those words burrowed deep. Vernon gestured for them to sit. They talked for hours. He told them about growing up in Alabama in the 40s and 50s, the quiet rules of survival every black boy learned early. About enlisting at 17, lying about his age, just to get out of a town that saw him as invisible. About the jungles of Vietnam, the heat, the noise, the death. About the night his unit was ambushed, and how he dragged 3 wounded men through enemy fire despite shrapnel tearing through his own legs. How he was sent home, broken but breathing, only to find a country that wouldn't look him in the eye. "I didn't do it for medals," Vernon said, his voice almost a whisper now. "I did it because they were my brothers. Didn't matter the color of their skin. We bled the same red." The room grew heavy with silence. It wasn't the sadness of regret anymore, it was reverence. Later that week, at the city's grand event to honor Vernon, Graves stood at the back of the auditorium, watching the old man take the stage. The crowd gave a standing ovation that lasted almost 5 minutes. Vernon stood there, a little hunched, but proud. His granddaughter, a bright-eyed girl named Elise, stood nearby, clutching his hand. When Vernon spoke, the room leaned in as if gravity itself demanded it. "I stand here today not because I'm special," he said, steady as stone. "I stand because I had faith in people, even when they didn't have faith in me. I stand because this country, messy and flawed as it is, still holds the seeds of greatness if we water them with hope and kindness. I fought for brothers who didn't look like me. I forgave neighbors who didn't trust me. And I still believe in a future where no one has to be invisible just to survive." He paused, looking out over the sea of faces, young and old, black and white, filled with something deeper than applause, understanding. "Heroes," he said, "aren't just the ones who fight wars. They're the ones who fight to see the humanity in each other, every single day." Tears ran down faces unashamedly. Elise clung to his arm, beaming with pride. After the ceremony, as Vernon was being escorted to a waiting car that would take him to a private dinner with state officials, he paused when he saw Graves and Turner standing in the shadow of the building. He walked over slowly, his cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement. "You boys remember something," he said, voice warm but firm. "Redemption isn't something you ask for. It's something you live. Every day. The way you see people. The way you serve. The way you lift others up when nobody's watching. Graves nodded, unable to find the right words. Turner cleared his throat, swallowing hard. We will, Mr. Marshall, Graves said finally. We promise. Vernon gave a slow, approving nod and turned away, disappearing into the night, leaving behind a silence full of awe and a spark of something more, a calling. From that day forward, things changed at the Montgomery Police Department. Officers underwent new training, not just the kind that taught procedure, but the kind that taught perspective. Graves and Turner volunteered to start a community outreach program, pairing officers with local veterans, seniors, and youth leaders to bridge the growing gaps of distrust. Slowly, faces once wary of the badge began to soften, and hearts once hardened by hurt began to open. And Vernon? He became a legend, not just in Montgomery but across the nation. Schools taught his story. Veterans found renewed respect. Strangers mailed him letters thanking him not just for his service, but for his grace, his patience, his unbreakable hope. In his small apartment, framed letters now lined the walls alongside that one old photograph. And every Sunday, Vernon and Elise would sit by the window, reading through new messages that poured in from every corner of America, from children who wanted to be brave like him, from soldiers who found courage because of him, from families who promised to teach their children better because of him. He had fought one kind of war half a century ago, but he had won a greater one now, the battle for dignity, for recognition, for a simple truth that sometimes gets lost in the noise of the world. Every soul carries a story worth hearing. And in hearing it, in truly seeing each other, we find not just forgiveness or redemption, but the very best of what it means to be human.